So, have you ever heard of remote viewing where you're actually looking at things but you're not there? It's a very complex situation, but we have expert Dr. Simeon Hein with us today, and he's going to talk to us about remote viewing, maybe some drone things, and whatever else we get into. Right. So, you're listening to Balance Your Life, our Evolving Consciousness podcast. I'm Debbie Peterson.
I'm Dee Valente.
And Simeon, thanks for being with us today.
Hey guys, thanks for having me back.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah. So you want to start a little bit with your background?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that he's such an interesting life story. I think that
I know.
anything he wants
This
to
touch me. It's Deb and
Dina.
Dina.
Dana. Dina. Deb and Dina. Yeah, it is a pretty interesting story, guys. Just because I like you, I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in New York. I went to Westchester school systems,
Yeah.
elementary school, high school. Those are pretty practical, focused.
Yeah.
Good schools. And I thought I knew how reality was coming from those school systems. Then I went to college in the East Coast. I went to Wesleyan and University in Connecticut, and I finished up at Hampshire College in Amherst, Mass, before I started my graduate training in sociology. So I never heard about any of these topics that I study now. None of the topics that I study, some of it could be called psychic phenomena, other names for it are paranormal. I
Right.
don't even think I would have necessarily believed in these topics unless I had had my own experience. And when I finished graduate school in sociology, statistics, I taught statistics for a while after getting my PhD as an assistant professor, WSU in Pullman, Washington. I came across this topic called remote viewing, and I wasn't even sure, what that was, but the
Right.
premise of RV was that people had this innate psychic ability to be able to perceive objects, events, people, and places at a distance. And I was so kind of uh, perplexed by this idea that the average person had any sort of psychic ability that I really wanted to take the class in it to see what was this about. Was it some sort of hoax? Was it real?
Right.
And so I came in kind of open-minded, skeptical, but like an open-minded skeptic. I was open to learning the idea that there may be some sort of abilities and scientific processes that I hadn't been taught about. Somehow between kindergarten and PhD, no one had told me
Any of
about
this.
Right. Right.
any. And so I took the class, and I was really surprised. Within a couple of days, it was an 8-day class in Atlanta, Georgia. I was really surprised that I could see that I was describing real data that was hidden in a folder on a picture.
That's so cool.
Wouldn't see till the session was done. And I have 7, 8 other people in the class that got similar results.
Hmm.
And ever since then, I've been wondering, how is it possible for us to be able to get accurate information about something that we haven't physically seen or heard or been told about?
Was this during the time when the government was exploring remote viewing and the general public was hearing that the government was doing this?
Yeah, exactly right, Dina. There was what I learned in the class is there had been a classified program in remote viewing from the Defense Intelligence Agency and later the Central Intelligence Agency. And the program had different names, but I think the public's most familiar with the name Stargate.
Mhm.
Sure.
And so this started in the 70s, and it started because the defense and intelligence establishment learned that the Soviet Union and China had programs in what was, they called it psychotronics. And it went back 60s, 50s. They had people that could do something called PK, move objects at a distance,
Hmm.
and affect things at a distance with their mind, psychokinesis. So, as you can imagine, our government became concerned that there was this psychic arms race. So, this is during the Cold War.
Right.
In the early 70s, they learned from some defectors that the Soviet Union has this very developed program in psychotronic warfare. And so they feel, oh, we have to we have to catch up, just like Sputnik in the 50s, right? When the satellite went overhead and we didn't have anything like that yet. So they developed their own program. And as you're saying, Dina, it was declassified in 1995. So it had been going for over 20 years,
Wow.
over $20 million. And there were various natural psychics like Ingo Swann and Pat Price that they were studied at SRI, and then they helped develop protocols that could be taught to the average person. And that was the idea, was training people in the military and intelligence community to do this. What they found is what it was simply a little too slow to be useful in combat situations. That was the original intention, is you could use this technique and get information about adversaries and enemies, in warfare situations. But what they found was that it takes a while to do these sessions, and that's true. It can take at least half hour, 2 hours to get the information, verify it. So it turned out to be useful when you already had other information from satellites and people on the ground, so-called SIGINT and HUMINT and these other types of intelligence that, governments gather in doing what they do. But that it's useful to corroborate some of that information, and that people can do it. And that is exactly when it started to be taught to the public, is people who had been in this program. When the program ended and was declassified, just started teaching it on their own because they felt that it was just useful for people to learn that they had these abilities.
Right. So when you took that first course, who was it that you took the course with? Was it just?
I learned it from a place called the Farsight Institute, and the director there, Dr. Courtney Brown, had learned it from someone who had worked in the Defense Intelligence Agency program at Fort Meade in Maryland. That's where some of the RV program was based. And again, there it was classified. So you might have seen that. People who saw that little shack on the outskirts of Fort Meade wouldn't have known what was going on there. And I think these people didn't even tell their wives what they were doing. It was considered that critical at the time.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Did you find success with it as soon as you started working with it, that first course, and then you were hooked? And
yeah, I would say within 2 or 3 days. It was some effort at first to describe images and sensations and sounds and perceptions that you were getting without knowing what you were doing. You're just given a blank sheet of paper and told to follow this protocol. It's called CRV, Coordinate Remote Viewing. It was developed out at SRI, Stanford Research Institute at Palo Alto, where the government had another branch of the program doing research. And, it used to take like a year to train someone before they got any results. It's a lot of time and effort to be working with a blank sheet of paper and just drawing impressions that come to you in this kind of structure. But still, you don't have anywhere to verify what you're perceiving. It's one of the strangest things, because you don't know if you're right or wrong. You don't know if you're making it up.
No clue. Right. Yeah.
No clue. You don't even get feedback from the or whether it's correct or not. Initially, when they started training people, they gave them feedback on each perception if it was correct or not. But they stopped. That was dropped after a while. Found people could do it anyway. So yeah, within 2 or 3 days, I was definitely getting drawings and sketches and perceptions that when you saw the target, when everything was all over and you got to see what you were viewing, it was surprising, to say the least, that you had gotten maybe 50, 60, 70% accurate information with no advanced help.
It's wild. I mean, I guess you have pretty intuitive though, right? Just naturally.
No, I mean, that's what you would have thought. I initially thought it was like special people like Ingo Swann or Nina Pelagina in the Soviet Union, people that they worked with over there. They had different psychics there that were also very good. I originally thought you had to be like naturally gifted in this, like those 3 women psychics that it used to be on that 80s TV show that worked with the police. Remember those 3 women?
Oh my gosh.
Bevy Yeagers and a couple others. I got to meet Bevy, so I just remembered her at some RV conferences. They were not actually naturals. Some of them had trained themselves, But you expect people that run
I
TV
guess
like that to
everybody
get
has
rid of
it.
that.
So, yeah.
You have
You
to
have to,
focus on it and want to tap into it. And
yeah.
you know, when you have guidance on what you're doing,
Yeah, right.
it's easier to develop.
Right. I just was surprised that I could do it too, and everyone
Right.
at some point would really nail the target, as we say, quote unquote. I mean, they'd really get a real large chunk of accurate information. And we're not just talking, well, a couple colors here and a couple shapes. We're talking sketches
Yeah.
where I just gave it to you and the target, you'd be able to match it immediately because they're famous landmarks or some special features of these pictures. And you'd look at the target and say, that's it. And one of the first sessions that I did where I really was like blown away by the results from my own results was the picture was of Cancun, Mexico on the beach looking at the hotels there.
Wow.
And when I did that session, I thought I had to be making it up because I got the beach and I got these hotels. And in my mind, I walked into the hotels and there were people speaking Spanish in the back. And when I finally saw the picture, it literally matched what I had drawn.
Wow.
It wasn't like maybe. It was like there were the rocks, there are the sailboats, there's the people on the beach, and there's the hotels behind there. You could see the picture of it that I had drawn. So ever since that time, I thought, wow, there has to be another type of energy and information that you and I are connected to that nobody told us about. And yeah, it's pretty subtle. I'm not saying it's a real loud thing. You could ignore it. But
Yeah.
I think most people have contact with it through a sense of intuition that we all get from time to time about events
Right.
that we couldn't really consciously know, but we had a sense of something going on or to call someone at a certain time. I think we've all had that experience.
Yes.
RV is the same thing. It's tapping into that natural intuition we already have. It's just giving it some structure.
So once you had this experience with being the intellectual that you were, and obviously kind of really shocked a little bit, or just, you know, real having to acknowledge this is pretty cool. What did you do next with it? What did that propel you into?
Well, they hired me back there as a teacher in
Wow.
the subject matter. I think it's mainly you know, I think I could do RV kind of, you know, like I mean, no, I don't think my RV was anything better than the average person could do. Maybe just a tad bit because I'm already, you know, I play music and kind of already tapped into those right brain skills. But, you know, I had a degree. So I think, you know, when you're putting together a research institute, you want people with PhDs.
Yeah.
So
Right.
I ended up teaching it. And then I realized I should be teaching this back in Boulder too. So I set up an institute, the Mount Baldy Institute, as you mentioned, in 1997 in Boulder, and just started getting classes together and teaching that same CRV protocol. And that's been going ever since. Because mainly, guys, because people told me they found it was very helpful to them to learn how to do this, to tap into their natural intuition. People told me, you know, it helped them in their businesses. Somehow their businesses just took off once they had learned this, or it just made them better at the, you know, whatever they were already working at. They just started to trust their intuition a little more, and they could see my classes were 3 days, and I would break it into like
Nope. Uh-oh.
You're a little frozen there for a second.
intermediate Friday, Saturday.
What?
Right.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just repeat again. What did you break it into over the 3 days?
I found it was rather than do an 8-day class, which is, you know, as you know, as technology developed during the 90s, people increasingly didn't have 8 days to devote to a training seminar.
Well, yeah.
Because by then we started to have email and cell phones and things like this, and it's a long time to spend away from home. So I did 3-day classes instead of an 8-day class, the way Farsight had done it.
Do you do other types of intuition development there, or it's strictly working? Because I know you call it's resonant viewing.
Yeah.
So
I call it resonant viewing. Ingo Swann had asked people to change the name of what if they wanted to teach it to something else, because he felt that CRV was like his proprietary system that he had developed for the government. So I called it resonant viewing, and mainly because I don't really think it's a remote process. It seems like the target is remote, but if you're successful at doing the viewing, then obviously some of the information was getting to you over here from wherever the target was. So I thought it was more like a type of tuning to a resonance type of process, kind of an analogy like a radio wave, not literally, but something like that.
Hi, Deb and I just wanted to take a minute and say thank you for watching. We hope that you're enjoying our guests, and we wanted to say please remember to subscribe below, like us, send us a comment.
And let us know if there's anybody you want to hear from, and we'll try to get them on.
So I was just going to ask, what is it in your take that's happening? Are you astro traveling and seeing something, or are you tuning into a vibration of something? And is that what's really going on?
Yeah, I think you're tuning into the vibration of something, and we have a scientific principle from quantum mechanics that's very similar to this. It's called the Aharonov-Bohm effect, and it was discovered in the 50s by Aharonov and Yakir Aharonov and David Bohm in the UK. Aharonov had wanted to study this principle. It's a feature of quantum mechanics that says, it's a kind of a strange feature that says, even if there's no electromagnetic field, you can still have information moving between 2 points in space through something called vector potential. It's not even something that's considered to be physically real. It's just a potential. It's like a number, a potential energy. But they found that the vector potential from quantum mechanics and the quantum mechanical equations actually represented something that was real. And in 86, it was verified by a researcher named Tonemura, working in Japan at one of the Japanese companies. And he experimentally showed that a particle in the presence of vector potential, not a field, it's zeroed out. There's nothing you'd pick up on a meter, but the vector potential still could influence something at a distance. And one of the people that was involved in the research, Dr. Hal Puthoff at SRI in California, later went on, after he left as director of the RV program, to get patents in vector potential as a type of communication for submarines, between a land base and submarines. Which you could see the advantage of that if it worked, which would be that you could communicate with a distant object, people, without using an electromagnetic signal. So there'd be nothing for anyone else to intercept. It's purely through this quantum vector potential. And initially, it wasn't considered to be real. It was considered to be a philosophical idea, again, until it was verified in 86. So I think RV might have something to do with this idea of communicating through vector potential, which would explain why it seems to work in any setting, any circumstance. It doesn't matter. They put Ingo Swann and one of his colleagues down in a submarine once in the Pacific to test if he could still view, since he was a very good viewer. He spent most of his life in Manhattan, and he had just gone out there to work with them. And he was just as good underwater as he was. And as you know, saltwater blocks electromagnetic signals. Submarines nowadays, to communicate with their base station, have to surface briefly. And nowadays, the communication often happens through very fast satellite communication. But the farther you go under the water, the salt water dampens the EM field, so you can't communicate. So this will be the advantage of it. And it might have something to do with that sort of Aharonov-Bohm effect. It might be it. We'd have to do more tests, and the program's no longer in operation, we're told. But I think it would have something to do with it. It seems very similar to Aharonov-Bohm effect.
Yeah, so fascinating.
So that's my answer. My kind of long-winded answer is, I think there.
Well, it's all right. It's so interesting. Yeah.
Guys, it's kind of important, because one of the criticisms of RV, and this came up at the hearings in front of Congress in 95. Congress wanted to know, was our $20 million, it seems kind of like small change nowadays, was that well spent? And they hired Jessica Utz, who was statistician from UC Davis and chairperson of the American Statistical Association, to her and Ray Hyman, who was a psychologist, I believe, at the University of Oregon at the time, to evaluate the RV data. And Hyman was the skeptic, and she was like more like the open-minded person. She found that statistically, just from looking at a few studies, like 8 or 9, not very much, that the viewer would pick up about 8% more information than they should have been able to pick up if there was nothing going on. And then Hyman said, yeah, I agree, it's 8% more, from like 25% to like, 33%, which is a lot session after session. If you're just getting 8% more accuracy for free, that's a lot on average. And she just looked at a few sessions. Hyman said, yes, I see that there's this 8% boost in accuracy from RV, but there's no scientific principle to explain it, so we should not look at it anymore. Well, that's not true anymore. We have quantum effects that seem to explain how this might work, and therefore you can't just say, well, there's no science behind it, so let's just move on to the next thing. There is some science behind it, and I think that's important.
Yeah.
Are you finding nowadays there's more of a rebirth of interest in this? That more people
Yeah, I think there is, and especially since you've had that podcast, all the telepathy tapes, about autistic kids with special abilities. And I think because of the amount of interest in UFOs and UAP recently, especially, in your state from the so-called quote unquote drones, whatever those turn out to be, we're getting an interest in what sort of government programs exist, and that leads to Freedom of Information Acts. And then we find out there were even more programs beyond RV recently as part of these UFO studies programs. OSAP, ATIP, you've probably heard about these, which were secret DoD programs to find out more about unidentified flying objects, unidentified aerial phenomena. And there was a program in 2010 that was proposed but not funded. But you could see what the proposal was, which was to use remote viewing to study UFOs. It's right there in the proposal to have remote viewers. So here it came up again in 2010. It wasn't funded, but it's interesting that
it is interesting.
Kind of went along with studying what some of these objects were, which,
have you done that?
We haven't done any RV of the drones yet, the so-called drones.
I was just going to say.
What is your take? What do you think they are?
They're some sort of breakthrough technology. I think at a minimum we can say that. Whatever the federal government told us a couple of weeks ago, of this just being misidentifications of hobbyist drones and planes and misidentifications of planets. When we listen to the various sheriff's departments in your state and state police, they tell us these objects are much faster than the drones they have, and they have police type drones that are not available to the public that can go about 50 miles an hour, which is faster than this type of thing that an average person could buy in a store. The typical hobbyist drones, I've looked it up, go maybe max 30, 35 miles an hour under optimal conditions for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. They don't stay up for, I've talked to people in your state who had these over their homes all night. And large objects, much larger police drones, faster. They seem to have defensive capabilities that they could neutralize drones around them. They could go dark instantly, which violates FAA regulation. So, and I put a video about this on my YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago. Whoever is operating these, I don't think for the most part these are non-human intelligence or what we think of as extraterrestrial. It's something terrestrial, but for some reason the federal government hasn't wanted to identify so far. This could change with the new administration next week, but so hasn't so far wanted to tell us. They said it's not ours and it's not adversarial. Well, who else would that be if it's not ours and it's not an adversarial country?
Well, I think it's amazing.
Private corporation that's testing, someone showing off, look what we can do. We can evade the state police, and we're
Right.
selling stock in our
Good stuff.
company.
Yeah.
What I think is amazing living here, it's kind of like, oh yeah, they're drones.
Yeah, we see them all
It's
the
just, we're
time.
so
Like
used to seeing things stop and zip around, and we're like, yeah, it's the drones.
yeah, like I live in Morris County. What's the first place that they were spotted was
You're in which county?
Morris.
Morris. So you're Morris, yeah.
Yeah.
So you're the
So
first.
yeah,
Yeah.
my friend started seeing them over her house like way before anyone was saying anything, which was funny. And I was over one night. She's like, there's like we were looking at one. And then like a couple days later, people started saying that they were seeing them, and it was just it's crazy.
So
Now,
the
yeah,
thing,
we're all used to it. Now we're like, yeah, whatever.
there's very specific FAA regulations about flying these drones. You have to
Yeah.
register your drone with the FAA. You're not supposed to fly them at night without permission, special, you got to get a waiver, and they have to be, you can't fly them over people, you can't fly them over any types of, yeah, you can't fly them directly over.
Military bases. You're not supposed to be doing these things.
Yeah.
No, there are pretty severe fines for violating restricted airspace.
Hmm.
So you've gotten used to them because they're up all the time, and some of them I've been told are the size of a car.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's not something that, like the ordinary person, like how does something that weighs that much,
Right.
the batteries in a Tesla vehicle weigh like 1,200 pounds.
Yeah.
So you're not talking about something that's lightweight. How does something like that stay up for 6 or 7 hours?
Yeah.
What's powering it? That's why I think it's some sort of breakthrough technology, and that's why we haven't been told about it.
Mhm.
It's probably highly classified. What we can't figure out is why would, if it was our own government doing this or corporations, why are they flying them around Air Force bases and forcing them to shut down, like happened to Wright-Patterson, Ohio, and Langley Air Force Base?
Yeah.
Had to relocate their F-35s because they were concerned about the security implications of having objects. So are they drones,
Yeah.
or are they something else? Like, are these really small aircraft?
Continue.
Even,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, driving through your state just a few weeks ago by Patterson, I saw a very strange looking plane that had lights like I had never seen configured before. And it was pretty low to the ground, and it was pretty slow. So it really fit those pictures that we've seen on the news of these really strange looking planes that don't make any noise and seem to be able to turn on a dime. Normally, planes that you see require a bit of chunk of sky to make it turn, not just turn. So who are operating these? We haven't been told the whole story yet. I'm hopeful that the next.
I know a couple of my friends have it where you could you point your phone at it, and then it'll tell you like what flight it is, what airline, all that.
Yeah.
If it's a flight.
If it's a flight.
And if it's not,
I've heard the craziest thing.
Yeah.
I heard recently that somebody we know destroyed his car. It was a new Tesla, and he drove into a pole because he's chasing these drones. What is,
Right.
videoing and these
Who's
things.
that? We don't want to say.
But I'll tell you offline.
Okay. Well, more to come, I
yes,
guess, right?
yes.
Like more to be revealed. Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very strange, and I think so. The general thing here is relating it back to RV.
Yes.
Yeah.
That it creates a sense of distrust in the federal government because they're saying nothing's happening. You're all just getting excited, but we have authority figures that people tend to respect, which is their sheriff's department and their state police, telling us, no, something's really going on here. And that there's a spillover effect because when the government says, no, there's no UFOs, there's no Bigfoot, you saw a bear, and, we don't have any evidence for these psychic phenomena and all this stuff, then people tend to think, well, they weren't telling us the truth about the quote unquote drones. I don't trust them. So what else are they not telling the truth about? And it leads people to be more interested. I find that there tends to be more interested in the topics that I'm interested in studying because people now realize that they've had the wool pulled over their eyes, so to speak,
right. Exactly.
for a long time, and probably ever since Roswell in 1947. We still haven't been told about that. There's still aspects of that seem to be classified.
Well, yeah, there are some intuitives that I talked to recently that said, yeah, we're just not ready to hear it. We're not ready to see it or hear it.
It's hard to prepare us to get there. I'm sure.
Well, right.
I think we've been working with
Right.
extraterrestrials or, you know, other species to develop so that we are ready as a human
Right.
race.
But
Because,
I was just told the other day, we're
yeah,
not quite
we're-
there
yeah,
yet.
yeah,
Yeah. So we'll see.
yeah.
Well,
I agree with
well,
that.
Simeon, thank you so much for being on with us again.
Let's continue
You got
another
the
time.
cowboy hat going. So safe travels across the country.
Thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. All right. And we'll talk to you soon then.
Okay, take care
All
for now.
right.
Take care.
Bye
Bye,
bye.
Simeon.
Bye.